Yep, it's time. With the final build out and tons of footage for over 75 characters to pour over, the floodgates are open. So I think it's about time to cover the king crocodile himself, Rool. Remember, all damages given are base damages with all multipliers removed, and since Rool is a newcomer, I will be going over every single one of his moves to the best of my ability. Let's get started first though, with his aesthetics. Alright, we're starting as we always do, with alternate skins, and it seems most if not all of Rool's alts are based off of other Kremlings. The blue one is either based on a Claptrap, a Blue Critter, or a Crusha. The orange one is based on a Recoil from Donkey Kong Country 3. The gray one is probably based on Cudgel from DKC 2, or maybe the gray variation of the Crusha. The next is this brown skin, most likely referencing a Clump from DKC 1 and 2. For this pink skin, the only thing I could think of is the pink critter from DKC 1. This yellow or gold skin is most likely based on either a yellow critter or a rock croc, both also from DKC 1. And finally, this silver or white skin was tricky at first, but I believe it is actually based on Mr. X, an unused boss from DKC 2 that had a small cameo in the German version of the manual. Moving on to his on-stage aesthetics, his entry animation has him float down with his arms crossed and laughing. This is very similar to how he entered the screen during the battle with him from DKC 1. His first taunt has Rool gnashing his jaws at the camera like a true cartoon crocodile, while his second has him doing a sumo stomp. Finally, his third taunt makes him slap his belly and show us how much of a thick lizard he is. Onto his victory animations, his first has him sweep his cape back and point at the screen the same way he does in his character's select render. His second one is a little weird. Rool looks back and forth like he's expecting to be jumped or something before finally posing for the freeze frame. And his last victory animation has him do a belly flop into a flip before slapping his sizable paunch. On the topic of victory fanfare, the music that plays during it is actually a remix of the opening to GangPlank Galleon, the song that played during the first battle with him. So the big guy has some personality to be sure, and the developers definitely made sure to show that, but did they spend the same amount of time on his moveset? Let's take a look. Okay then, starting simple we have his jab, a nice palm strike claw swipe into a kick. Jab 1 comes out at a very respectable frame 4, tying Charizard for the fastest super heavy jab in the game. The first two hits do 2.5% each, with the third dealing 7 for a meaty total of 12% base damage. This makes it one of the few jabs in the game to cross the elusive 10% damage threshold, with a lot of other jabs from Smash 4 being nerfed down to below that mark. His F-tilt is this brutal clap with his hands, crushing the skull of his enemies like a watermelon and dealing a decent 11% base damage. The frame 12 startup is not the best to be sure, but its knockback is very good. It can be angled, and it even has super armor on startup at least frame 8, so I'd expect it to be a popular tool when smash attacks just aren't needed. But let me take a moment to discuss its armor because it doesn't work like ordinary super armor. Many of Rool's moves involve his huge stomach and the armor plate he has on it. We will get into which moves have this armor as we cover them, but the important thing to note is that while it's better than ordinary super armor in that he only takes half the damage, it isn't indefinite. As shown in the treehouse footage, when Rool gets hit during his super armor frames, his armor plate will crack. Now, a crack will heal pretty quickly, only taking about 5 to 10 seconds depending on how damaged it is. But the catch is that while you're using a move with armor, the regeneration will halt until it's over. If Rool's armor tanks 3 separate attacks before it heals up, it will break in dramatic fashion and leave him stunned as if his shield was just broken. So you'll have to be smart when utilizing it and not simply spam armor moves to plow through everything. If F-tilt seems too slow for your liking, then I recommend up-tilt. This has Rool do a high-reaching uppercut, starting at a very impressive frame 5 and remaining active for a good while after that. The early hit launches outward, and does a solid 11.5 base damage, while the late hit launches straight up with less knockback, dealing around 7 to 8% depending on the hitbox, which in addition to being a fast, safe anti-air with good range and low lag, could lead into some combos. We'll have to see. His down tilt is probably the most interesting though. Rool stomps his foot down, burying any opponent caught in the sweet spot, and launching anyone else in the rather large sour spot. The frame 14 startup is an issue, and the damage is not the best, only 8 for the berry hitbox and 7 for the sour spot. But burying brings with it a lot of utility, from straight up kill confirms if they don't mash quick enough, to following the opponent after they pop out. And the sour spot can even lead into moves like fair and up air, so definitely a tool worth using. Speaking of worth using, we have dash attack. I know I don't normally inject opinions into my analyses, but I'm just gonna say it. K-Rool might have one of the best dash attacks in the game. We're talking about a move that comes out in just 7 frames, does 15 damage, is active for at least 10 more frames after that, dealing a still decent 11%, has a huge hitbox, and even has super armor. There's really not much else to say about it, it's everything you could reasonably want from a heavy's dash attack. Anyway, moving on, we have his smash attacks, starting with F Smash. This has K-Rool pull out his boxing gloves from DK64 and punch his opponent square in the jaw. This is one of K-Rool's slowest attacks, coming out in an excruciating 19 frames. The damage, however, is pretty good, dealing 19% base damage with a 16.5% sour spot closer to the shoulder. The lag is pretty bad though, as this move lasts more than a second from start to finish, but it can also be angled, so it will definitely still be useful for hard reads on buried opponents or directional air dodges. His up smash is one of the most interesting moves I've seen from the newcomers. K-Rool shoots upwards before slamming downward into a plank position. This move has a buffet of different hitboxes, all with their own properties and damages. Take a drink every time I say hitbox here. The initial upwards hitbox comes out in an astounding 6 frames, already making it one of the fastest smash attacks in the game, and deals a very respectable 15%. After that, around frame 19 or so, K-Rool will fall forward and deal 8 damage to anything along the way. The interesting thing about this one is it actually has a spike hitbox, most likely to lead into the final slam hitbox on frame 21. This also has multiple different hitboxes, with the sweet spot directly under K-Rool dealing about 13.5, and the impact around him dealing 10. This move is goofy as hell, but still has a ton of versatility, with a hitbox for seemingly every occasion. His down smash is refreshingly simple in comparison. This is another body slam down smash similar to Ridley's. It dodges attacks like Ridley's, and even has the same awful 24 frame startup. However, not only is it more powerful than Ridley's, dealing a massive 18% on the sweet spot directly under K-Rool and 4% on the splash hitbox behind him, but it's another one of those moves that utilizes K-Rool's super armor mechanic, coming out as early as frame 19. This means not only will it dodge attacks, but power through them as well. A great tool overall and one of the better options to use on a buried opponent. Moving along to his grab game, things are pretty typical for a heavyweight, with standing grab coming out in 8 frames, dash grab in 11, and pivot grab in 12. They all have FAFs hovering in the low to high 40s, and they all have great range, especially pivot grab. What's more impressive are the throws you get once you land that grab. His forward throw has K-Rool slam his opponent down like a football after a touchdown and deals 10% base damage. It doesn't kill or anything, but it scores major points for the hilarity factor alone. With his back throw, K-Rool grabs the opponent's face and drags it along the ground before dealing 11% base damage. It doesn't have the most power in the world, but is reportedly strong enough to be a kill throw near the ledge, and is always a sufficiently brutal way to get your opponent off stage. His up throw is even more brutal though, as K-Rool leaps high off screen before slamming down his opponent with a vicious backbreaker. This is by a large margin the most damaging normal throw in the game so far, dealing a massive 16% base damage. The knockback is good, but not great. It kills at higher percents, but it's recommended you try to land it on a high platform. His most interesting throw though is down throw. K-Rool channels as inner Android 16 and simply slams his opponent into the ground, planting them like a flower and dealing 5 damage. This obviously is another burying move, which means you get all the same benefits mentioned before with down tilt, but out of a much easier to land grab, although they aren't buried for very long. Definitely one to look out for. But surely this huge portly crocodile couldn't be that good in the air, right? Well, you'd be surprised. Let's take a look at his aerials. Things start off strong with K-Rool's neutral air, as he belly flops onto the opponent, dealing 12% on the strong initial hit and a still decent 8% damage on the later hitbox. This is a pretty fast neutral air for a heavy, coming out in frame 8, but its landing lag is rather mediocre for the type of move it is. Luckily, it's another member of the Super Armor Club, so overall this move should still be pretty useful in the disadvantage. Forward air is a classic dropkick, coming out at frame 10, dealing a huge 14% on the sweet spot, and a respectable 12% on the sour spot. It has nice knockback, and the 11 frames of landing lag this move has is impressive for an aerial with this power. All in all, not bad. Back air might just join the ranks of Ganon Dare, Mario Fair, and Falcon Knee for one of the hypest moves in Smash. Rool cocks back his arm before finally swinging it back down on a painfully slow frame 19, dealing an absolutely ludicrous 19% base damage. This move has several different hitboxes, including a sour spot closer to Rool's body, dealing 14.5%, and the best one, a spiking sweet spot at the end of the fist. Now, hype doesn't always equal viability when it comes to attacks in Smash, but this move's huge power and relatively low 14 frames of end lag make it at least worth considering if not for its huge flare. Up air, in comparison, is much more tame, but still very good nonetheless. Rool straightens his body out and headbutts his opponent. This move comes out very fast at frame 7, which makes the 14% base damage and huge knockback that come with it all the more impressive. It also gives Rool a little boost of momentum upward, which could come in handy for extending its reach beyond what your jumps would normally give you. Don't try to use it as a recovery option though. No, it doesn't put you into freefall or anything, but it has a huge amount of end lag in the air and it could get you killed. Speaking of impressive, we have Rool's Dare, making him do an oddly nimble flip before stomping down on the opponent and dealing 12% base damage. This isn't a Ganondorf Dare or anything, but the frame 12 startup is some of the best for a spike, being right up there with Cloud's, and it also has a weaker hitbox doing 9% and staying out for at least another 8 frames after, boosting this move's utility. I can definitely see this move being one of the better, quote, traditional down airs. Okay, so pretty impressive so far, but as you probably know, special moves can make or break a character, so let's check out what Rool has to offer in that department. Starting, as we always do, with Neutral B, it's kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, 31 frames is a long time to wait for a projectile to come out. On the other hand, that projectile does 13% and is active for 2 whole seconds after that, opening up a lot of setup and doubles possibilities. On top of that, you can use the blunderbuss like a vacuum to suck in your cannonball, only instead of blowing up in his face like it did in his games, Rool can actually shoot it back for an increased 17% base damage. Apparently this vacuum sucks in other projectiles and items as well, not just your cannonball, and if the damage ratios from your own projectile are anything to go by, expect around a 1.3 times multipliers on projectiles you send back. This vacuum can also be used to suck in opponents similar to Kirby or DDD and shoot them back out for 12% base damage. It's not a kill move or anything, but I could see it being useful in doubles, and if you simply hold B, you can activate the vacuum by itself without having to shoot a projectile out first. Overall, kind of gimmicky, but I'm sure it will have its uses somewhere. His side B is much more traditional in that it's both a direct homage to its main attack from DKC1, and that it's a pretty standard boomerang attack with all of the setups and potential that come along with a move of that nature. It comes out frame 27, same as moves like Link's Boomerang, deals 8% on its initial path, and is still very decent 6% on the return path. This move, by the way, is yet another example of Rool's Super Armor startup, coming out pretty early around frame 14 and lasting all the way up until at least frame 57 or so. Of course, because it's Rool, some other gimmicks had to be shoehorned in too. In this case, if the crown doesn't quite make it back to your head, be it because it hit a platform on the way back or what have you, it will then become an item any player besides Rool can pick up and throw. The crown actually does a lot of damage when used by the opponent, so careful management of it is necessary to avoid any nasty mishaps. During this time, if Rool tries to side B again, he will get this failure animation. The crown will continually respawn either over time or whenever it's thrown off stage, and all Rool has to do is touch it to get it back on his head. It'd be funny if not having his crown made his up air weaker, but I doubt that's the case. His down B is actually a pretty standard counter, as Rool uses his belly to bounce back whatever the enemy hits him with. This counter is pretty decent overall, coming active around frame 5 or 6 and dealing a minimum of 12% base damage. The actual damage multiplier is a bit of a mystery, but based on the damage he dealt countering this POW block, I estimate it to be around 1.5 times, which is very high. Rool's up B has him strap on his helicopter pack from Donkey Kong Country 3 and take to the skies, and I really do mean the skies. It acts similar to Duck Hunts, but covers a much greater distance in a much shorter time. Plus the helicopter rotor has a hitbox, hitting anything that gets caught in it multiple times for 3 damage apiece, and is even large enough to poke through the stage and hit opponents. He does eventually go into freefall, but it takes a good while, and Rool will most likely either grab the ledge or land on stage before that happens. It's not Witch Twist or anything, and it is definitely plenty exploitable, but as far as super heavy recoveries go, it could be a lot worse. Finally, Rool's final smash has him fire up his Blast-O-Matic and recreate the Game Over screen from DK64, blasting the DK Isle into oblivion and dealing massive damage to anyone scooped up by it. And I think that about covers it for Rool. Thanks for watching everyone, it means a lot. Let me know in the comments what you think of Rool. Do you think he looks viable or just another low tier heavy? If you'd like to show additional support monetarily, head on over to the Patreon. You can get access to the community Discord along with a few other goodies. As for who I'll cover next, I'm not sure. Footage on the new build is touch and go, and there are mere weeks left before release. I'll just say stay tuned because I guarantee you'll like what I have in store for you. Thanks again, and I'll see you later.